My name is, let's start it. My name is Vedran Dzihic. I'm senior researcher at the Austrian Institute for International Affairs and teaching at the University of Vienna, coming originally from Bosnia, but unfortunately not right now in Bosnia, but in cloudy Vienna. Thank you so much for all of you that have joined us right now for this panel focusing on governance and democracy. And as usual, I mean, we have the most wonderful panel that you can imagine, and this is always the panel that we have right now. But this is a very, I mean, you will see this is a very knowledgeable and interesting panel. We have three panelists with us. Let me quickly just introduce them shortly, and then give you one or two sentences on the context of our debate today. So Claudia Singer is in Vienna right now. She is coordinating the EU SDR's priority area 10, focusing on institution capacity and cooperation. Claudia, very warm welcome. Then Sebastian Schäffer is managing director of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe. And when we, I mean, Erhard Busek, who you probably know from his engagement in various issues related to the Danube region and Central Eastern European parts of Europe. IDM has been running various activities on the region, networks, and Sebastian is now managing the institute and has various insights into all possible parts of this region, particularly also a deeper knowledge on Moldova and Ukraine, has published also a lot. So Sebastian, thanks a lot for joining us for the panel today. And last but not least, Elton Stafa. We are all jealous because Elton is sitting in Tirana and there is some sun in Tirana that we don't have in Vienna. Elton is senior decentralization expert at NALAS, leads also the NALAS task force on fiscal decentralization, which is an important topic, but as a general political scientist, I always try to understand all the aspects of fiscal decentralization. And there is a good colleague of mine, Sanja Kmezic from Graz, who did a lot on this topic, and luckily I learned at least a little bit from her. So that's the panel. Thank you so much. One or two sentences on the importance of the topic. I mean, during the day today, the issue of democracy, the issue of rule of law, the issue of involvement of civil society, on the role of institutions, on all possible levels of government, but also particularly on the level of the local governance were mentioned several times and underlined. I mean, this nexus between democracy and governance is a particularly complex one. I mean, we know that there is, I mean, obviously the term of good governance, that we all know what it contains and that we want to achieve also on the local level. But at the same time, we know that there is a lot of bad governance standing on the opposite side, preventing all of us to achieve the results that we want to achieve. And we have to be quite blunt and open at the beginning. Democracy in Southeastern Europe has suffered in the last years, rather than a trend towards deeper democratization. We see even trends of autocratization, of facade democracies, of faking democracies, and there are all possible problems that we face when we talk about this kind of a nexus between governance and democracy, and particularly when we think about SDGs that are in the focus of the conference, but also in terms of European integration. And Kathleen Huber outlined some dilemmas that the EU is facing in terms of the EU enlargement. So we are in a very rough sea right now when it comes to democracy and governance. But I mean, luckily there is a lot of engagement, a lot of institutions, including Center for Public Administration and Research, and the projects are contributing a lot, trying to do the best. And let's look together in few of the particular aspects of the topic. We will organize the debate by having first inputs by Sebastian Schäffer, Claudia Singer, and Elton Stafa, followed by probably one small additional question from my side, and then we will open up for Q&A for all of you. And I see at least right now 36 people that have joined us in the meantime. That's wonderful. Let's give our best not to disappoint you. So, Sebastian Schäffer, the floor is yours. What's your perspective on the broader issue of governance and democracy, and just in terms of technical support in technicalities? Please mute yourself when you are not speaking, so that we have the best possible audio connection. So, Sebastian, thanks a lot for joining us. The floor is yours. Very keen to hear what you have to say.
Vedran, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, to at least see familiar faces virtually, see new faces also virtually, hopefully soon enough in person. I would like to say also thank you to the KD-Stat for organizing this conference and using this technical surroundings, which I didn't know before, and they seem to be working quite well and are quite interesting to make the best of the current situation. What I'm going to do right now is I've structured my input into 5 different pillars with 3 points each. First, I'm gonna give you 3 challenges, then I'm gonna tell you what we need to do, then I'm gonna give some concrete proposals, I'm gonna say what we are doing at IDM, and then I'm gonna present you the shortcomings that we are having as some sort of basis for the discussion maybe. The challenges that we are facing with regards to democracy and governance in the region that we have been talking about is, first, the European integration process is far too slow and perceived as complicated. We have more and more rules, we have more and more member states, it becomes less and less easy to actually become a member. This is part of a process that exists, but it is a challenge. The second challenge is that the member states have different priorities, not only when it comes to enlargement, but also when it comes to relationship in the neighborhood. That can be due to historical ties, this can be due to geographical location. And we also see that some of the member states are having troubles to actually fulfill the Copenhagen criteria themselves once they are in the club, so to say. And the third challenge that I see is that we need to work more on the civil societies, that they understand why this process is so complicated, that they understand why it takes so much time, but also to invite them to participate and also to foster a broader discussion. This leads to what we need to do. Well, with relationship to the first challenge, we need to speed up the process. That's something that we have been saying for ages, that has been debated for ages, and the process itself has a justification. I also understand why it bears certain challenges, and of course it is a two-way street. When we say we need to speed up the process, I would even go as far as saying, like, bring them all in, but make sure that we have the safeguarding mechanisms within the European Union, which means that we need to, as a second point, offer opportunities for involvement and exchange in a European level, on a European level. And of course, we also need to inform and discuss with the broader public. How can we do that? We need immediate integration wherever that is possible. It is, of course, utopia to say we just integrate all of the Western Balkan countries, and even beyond that, everyone who is willing into the existing structures that we have, although this is something that we should aim for. And therefore, if this is not possible, find ways where we can deeper engage in certain areas. In order to be able to implement that, we need institutional reform. We need regionalization on a European level by far more than what we have seen so far. We need to stress much more the importance of the third level, when we have the European level, when we have the national level, and then the regional and even local level, we need to stress how important these players are for European integration, and that needs to be reflected in the institutional setup of the European Union. And I would even go as far as proposing here a second chamber, take away the influence on the legislative level in the European Union from the national states and transfer them to the regional level. And then, of course, we need to reduce the fear, because what I often experience is that when you talk to the broader public of member countries, they are afraid that if we have new members joining, that they will lose something, that something will be taken away from them. We need to reduce these fears, and we need to demand from the civil societies, in whether they are in the club or outside of the club, that they engage more, but also support them so that they are enabled to engage more with stakeholders, decision makers, and actors. So what are we doing? We try to discuss with stakeholders, actors, and decision makers through our events, through monitoring the parliamentary elections that are happening in the regions with different formats, live streams, podcasts, publications. We try to propose proposals for institutional reforms through policy papers, through workshops, and through projects. We are running currently a project that is called From Fictional to Functioning Democracy at IDM. And we have to inform, continue to inform, but also listen and engage with the general and broader public, something that we are trying to do, amongst others, through a project that is called Democracy. And to finalize and sum up, what are the shortcomings with regards to the points that I have mentioned? Reach and impact. We absolutely have to admit that the possibilities to bring these things across to the relevant actors and also the relevant institutions is limited. The second shortcoming is funding and implementation, because in order to implement, you need the necessary resources, and when you have to focus more on generating resources, the output necessarily is less aim-driven. And the third and most important probably is something that we have also seen when we did an analysis of especially our social media activities. We need to leave the bubble. We are reaching the people that we are engaging with, but we need to get out of this bubble. We need to increase the reach, and we need to engage with other target audiences as we are reaching at the moment. So far from my side, and thank you very much.
So much, Sebastian. I mean, the last 3 points are quite important, but let me just quickly follow up with a short question on this issue of the bubble. I mean, sometimes when it comes to the EU enlargement and democratization, which has been ongoing for quite a long time, and all the institutions that we have in place are still in place, like from Regional Cooperation Council, from European Union institutions, OEC, etc., etc. Many agencies putting a hard effort to achieve something. There are many people that simply, I mean, also like common citizens, that basically when looking at the European Union, at the institutions, at the agencies, always refer to them as part of elites, bubble, etc., etc. And I mean, you've made a kind of a fundamental point how to connect basically the good efforts that all of us are bringing in with what the citizens perceive, and how important is it also to on a broader level create a kind of a more free public, not that much orchestrated by ruling parties, local elites, etc., etc., where you get some more space for this kind of for reducing the prejudices, etc., etc., and coming out of the bubble. And my question would be, I mean, regarding this bubble, I mean, the EU has always underlined that they want to increase the communication, that they need to do this and that, and we have like now a specific situation. The EU has contributed the most for the COVID and COVID-19 recovery, medical equipment, support, etc., etc. Yet right now in Serbia, there is a situation unfolding. Vucic is organizing the Chinese vaccines, etc., etc., and the people have the perception that Chinese are the best friends, and then the European Union is not. What will be your? I mean, there is no quick fix, but what will be your one or two like points how to overcome this kind of a vicious circle where we always like try, but we cannot achieve, and the local elites are mixing it up and creating problems. Do you have any hints from your side?
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good question, and I don't have a quick fix, as you mentioned. The challenge is that I have the feeling that this communication battle on a European level has started with a major disadvantage, and the more the EU is trying to keep up with that, I have the feeling they're always a step behind. So what I would say is you need to bring it closer to the citizens, and here is when the regional and local level comes into that. When we look at enlargement, the Big Bang and the last rounds, there have been a lot of information campaigns, how the EU functions, what it brings to us, what are the things that we can benefit from beforehand, and then they join, and this stops. But this is not the failure of the European Union. It's not the failure of the European Commission. It's not the failure of some spaceship in Brussels. The failure is with the national states, because it's their job and they need to continue. And in order to engage and inform and stop this blame game, I mean, if we look at, you mentioned vaccines, yeah? I mean, what Vucic is playing, he has already been doing that with medical equipment shortly after the pandemic broke out. Yeah? Suddenly, Chinese are the best friends, and it was not communicated that a lot of aid has been flowing from the side of the European Union. In order to tackle these sort of, I don't say I have an understanding for Vucic, but I understand why he's doing this, why he's populistically exploiting this. In order to counter that, go to the ground and engage with the regional and the local level, and bring good examples, best practices to the people. So we need to win on a lower level these people over. We see that in certain municipalities that are going against these populistic rhetorics that come from member states even. So we need to engage more here. We need to bring it closer and rely on different levels in the multi-level governance system, because the EU from top down will always perceived as bureaucratic, technocratic, cumbersome, slow.
Sebastian, I mean, yes, of course. I mean, we need to do much more. The tricky part is that we keep repeating it, but yet, I mean, there is no solution to see where the gaps are, where the structural problems are, and to try to address them. And I mean, the people sitting in the European Union, in all the agencies, they're trying to give their best. And to reach out to the citizens. I mean, I was just following more closely the events in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then the new ambassador of the EU, EUSR, Special Representative Johann Sattler from Austria, is explicitly trying to intensively reach out to citizens, civil society organizations, and to go to the local level. I mean, this kind of a local governance, local level, address the problems in small cities is definitely a key to get trust. I mean, this is the beginning and the end of the communication. As soon as you have trust, you can make the next step. Thanks a lot. Claudia, I mean, EU SDR, we all, from the very beginning on, were expecting so much. A lot has been done, and we always, I mean, we expect to have more coming out of those regional initiatives. You have been coordinating the priority area 10. which is focusing on institutional capacities and cooperation that goes towards civil society, that reaches out to local actors. Having in mind all the experiences that you have made over the course of last years, where do you see basically the crucial challenges, and what would you add to this overall topic and nexus of democracy in order to make it working and delivering?
Well, good question. And I think the answer, I guess we could discuss about the various aspects and layers and dimensions for days and days. I guess viewing the issues on governance and democracy from the lens or through the lens of regional development, I guess our sort of the initial question is always cui bono. So what is our goal when we talk about good governance, when we talk about democracy? So what's actually the ultimate purpose? And for us, clearly, and also this very pronounced in the strategy, the ultimate purpose is eventually providing a good quality of life for people. So the question is, how can we achieve effective public administrations, effective institutions, effective democracies, and effective governance eventually? And there's something actually that I want to stress here, and this is something that you just mentioned, and this is trust. First and foremost, trust. Trust between state and non-state actors. This is what we also learn when what Sebastian was mentioning with the blame game, and also to leave the EU bubble or leave this elitist bubble, that we need to sort of enter into a dialogue, and a mutual dialogue to understand the challenges and needs on both ends. It's about understanding civic society and the needs and concerns that they have. But at the same time, it also, and this is when we engage about civil society, this is also something we tend to forget about. It's not only the public administrations or political level that needs to offer opportunities, which are lacking, but we also need to build capacities on the side of civil society to engage in this process. Because this is also one of our experiences, that even if public administrations are opening up and say, okay, we include civil society in a consultation forum and a platform, but then there is no response. The sort of conclusion is, well, we offered it, but they didn't want to comply and they don't want to work with us. When in the end, it's not the will that is lacking, but just the capacity to actually understand what's going on in these processes in order to make a meaningful contribution. But it's also important, and I think this is what we saw this morning from the contribution from Damir Marjanovic in Bosnia, about that it's not about only trust between state and non-state actors, it's also trust between the different levels. But because this is also decisive when we talk about policy coordination from national to local level, when it comes to co-creation of solutions, when it comes to suggestions and how they are taken into account, or if they're just ignored. I guess if there's a lack of trust between the different levels, then you can also expect that there will be also a lot less compliance. So I guess trust is, I think, the most important issue when we talk about the desired outcomes and things that we need to push forward. Secondly, the ability to adapt. So this is about, refers to public institutions and their ability to improve public services, public policies, and the delivery of public policies based on the needs and expectations of the residents. Of course, we want to have stable and resilient institutions, but at the same time, the need to have a certain degree of flexibility to be adaptive and have, for example, adopt a more user-centric approach to public policy and public service delivery. That we need also sort of a certain level of adaptability when it comes, for example, to facing crisis just like a pandemic. And again, we see the numerous examples how public governances and democracies are struggling once they're confronted with crisis. And we know that even if we are on the way to overcome the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we know that there are other crises or potential crises on our doorsteps, looking at climate change and all kinds of dynamics going together with that, such as migration dynamics and yeah, numerous other examples for that. And thirdly, I would something that we observed when working in the field of public governance is to overcome sort of strictly hierarchical administrative culture. It might not seem sort of at first maybe the most important thing, because you feel that there are a lot more crucial issues at hand. But I guess one point, what I mean with that is also what I want to refer to, that is, for example, when we talk about good quality of life for people, then it's also a way of how to approach challenges. And with a look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to have a more systemic understanding of challenges and more systemic understanding of policy solutions. So in the end, what we need is sort of also overcome these sector policy view, so that we just look at climate change just from the environmental perspective, at competitiveness just from the business side. So these are all interlinked policies, and the solutions that we develop for them is also a way of how we hamper or create a bigger impact. And there I'm also coming again to what Sebastian said about the shortcomings. Yes, it's about also creating more impact through approaching the challenges that we're facing in a more systemic way, and sort of try to more create positive spillover effects instead of negative spillover effects. So this is what we are trying also to do and work in our priority area, and what we try to push forward to. And against this background, to stress a bit more the local role, because we are trying to also enforce and promote a lot more the strengthening and empowering of local governance, is that they are playing a crucial role, because local administrations, local governance provides low thresholds to engage civic society. So if civil society organizations or citizens, residents want to engage with public institutions, they usually start at local level. They start with things that are at their heart. But it's also that local governments have a high responsibility in public service delivery. We heard also this morning in the keynotes from that we heard in the keynotes that it's important, it's crucial to move forward with fiscal decentralization, because we need to provide high quality public service provision. And it's, of course, it's the local governments that are taking care about waste management, about social welfare provision, about access to healthcare. So these are the public services that we need to deliver. And this is also what people perceive. And this is also with another level of local governance, which means that the local level is where public policies are getting most tangible. For example, taking the example of Roma inclusion, which is also a big issue in Southeast Europe. We have 2020, last year, the European Union adopted a new EU Roma inclusion framework. Now this year, the member states are required to develop national action plans on Roma inclusion. But what is really crucial is what happens in the next 10 years. And in the next 10 years, we need to improve access to housing. We need to improve access to labor markets. We need to improve access to healthcare. We need to improve the access to social service provision. We need to tackle school dropouts. Where does this happen? At local level, usually. And even if even if it's not 100% lying on the shoulders of local governments or local administrations, it's at least their contribution that makes a difference. Whether or not a policy is perceived as being successful or just failing. And yeah, so this is, and also another point about this, these aspects of local governance is also that consequently local governments are crucial supporters for civic society and civil society organizations. This is also what we observe when it comes to support for civil society organizations. It's on the one hand the European Union, but on the other hand local governments, and then actually on the third place it would be national governments who support civil society organizations. So we see that there is also a more stronger perceived need to cooperate with the different stakeholders. So yeah, this is maybe from an attempt, a weak attempt to structure somehow what we do and what we try to focus on in our work and what we did in the past years.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. I mean, you do a lot. Never say you do too much, but thanks a lot. There's two just quick follow-up questions. I mean, the one is I'm looking into the chat, and there's a set of interesting questions that you can also see. I will bring them in the next round. But Claudia, just a quick one or two sentences. Ugo Poli just made a comment on how important the small projects are for these civil society organizations to be more active, not to go big, but to go on the local level small, where we still have a lot of space for improvement. So if you can just say one or two sentences on that one, and then a more tricky question. Basically, I mean, you mentioned. I mean, we need effective public administration. We need institutional capacities. We need trust. We need to go to the local level. But what do we do, and what can we do if and this is what we have in some countries of the region, if the states are captured, if the local governments and local units of governance are captured, structured through the clientelistic party power structures lines, where basically even the best effort is just put aside for the sake of direct interests of some small political elites on the local level. How to bridge this moment? That's I mean, you have the best efforts, but you have a backsliding of democracy in some of the countries, and we speak about it all the time. So how far can we go improving local governance institutional capacities at the local level in states where there is no will to improve them? Because when you improve them, you arrive at more transparency, more transparent institutions, more effective institutions. And this is sometimes what political parties and people running the show in some of the countries just thinking about. SDA in Bosnia, SNS in Serbia, Edi Rama structures in Albania, etc., etc. So this is just a kind of a provoking small second part. But I mean, this Ugo Poli's very important question on small projects. If you could tackle that one briefly, and if you have one or two hints on this bigger issue, and then we move to Elton.
I think I start with the comment from Ugo Polo, because I think that's the easier part to comment on. So, but yes, it's true. The small scale funding and small scale projects are certainly crucial, because these are the lower threshold for civil society organizations to engage. And I will also see that it's not always the money and not always the big investment projects that are making the difference. So yes, I think that this is something we need to consider, and also in the EU funding framework, something that we need to stress a lot more. Not only with the EU member states, but of course also, and even more so, with the accession countries and neighboring countries. And we really need to see how to move forward. But there are also great initiatives, I have to say at this point, that particularly the agencies of development cooperation, be it the Austrian Development Agency, being the Norway grants, that are doing a great deal in this regard. And yeah, so actually the bigger supporters in this regard are probably more so the national development cooperation agencies. In terms of the capture state, I have to say, I guess if I would have a solution to that, I guess I would qualify to win the Nobel Prize.
This is the $1 million question. So
I think, but yes, when it comes to, I guess, in the end, it is a lot about, from my point of view, from our observations, it's a lot about pressure. Financial pressure, for example, but a pressure, but then is the question who exerts the pressure. So if we would have a big acknowledgement of national governments that local governments are also crucial in the policy implementation, policy development, and would actually, and are principally in favor of engagement of civil society and multi-level governance, actual multi-level governance, then there could be a pressure on from national level to the local level. However, this is not really something that we observe in reality. The European Union, of course, is certainly a big driver, but this is also, and this is sometimes, but this is also what we observe now, that we do have the European Union sometimes trying to exert pressure, saying you need to engage and encourage more civil society in the end, or to to push forward public administration reform. But it obviously also just works to a certain degree, because there needs to be some sort of imminent change and enforcement. Of course, we need to have more civil society in the watchdog function. But this is again also a question of financing. We are working here also more. We try to push forward more in terms of social, social entrepreneurship and social and social innovation, crowdfunding initiatives. It's also just with very limited. It has its limitations, but of course, if we do at least try to find alternative ways for civil society to prevail and to develop, then we hope that also this could put some more pressure. So in the end, what we need is pressure from all kinds of sides, and we if we see that local governments are sort of in a sort of capture state situation. But then we need to have a very comprehensive approach to see which actors, I think we need to know which actors can exert pressure to what extent, and then to see how we can support these stakeholders to get where we want to be.
Great, thanks a lot, Claudia. I mean, if I would be on the Nobel Peace Prize or local governance and institutional capacities Nobel Prize, I will definitely give you one. Now pressure. Now all pressure is on Elton, but Elton is very much equipped to deliver upon the pressure. Elton has these issues of decentralization and fiscal decentralization in particular for quite some long time, right now, if I got it right, you are in the process of setting up this regional decentralization observatory, and there is also a kind of a first assessment on the region, looking into where you can see a progress, what are the problems, etc., etc. You have some empirical data. I believe it will be amazing if you just share it with us, so that we get this kind of a broader picture, and definitely a few hints on the fiscal decentralization and the importance of fiscal decentralization for local governance to be able to exercise pressure and to function effectively and efficiently. So Elton, now we fly from Vienna to Tirana, and are all ears.
Thank you, Vedran. Really, I mean, now I can feel all the pressure. Actually, it's been many important points that they really show all of these. These points, they show how complex these issues are, and how interrelated and interconnected the different issues are. And then we see that, you know, it's not easy to provide answers to them. From my perspective, the most important part is to understand that this is a process, and it takes time and energy and then goodwill from many actors to improve the situation and get there. But as you mentioned, we've been working on together at NALAS, together with the KDZ, we've been working on establishing this regional decentralization observatory, and then we developed an index, actually. So we made an assessment about the progress of decentralization and local government reform in the region of Southeast Europe, and I'm happy to share here with you some of these preliminary results. And I'll try to build in also on the key messages that were mentioned earlier by Claudia and Sebastian. But I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to exchange that. So the big number. So in the overall, big picture from a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of progress and then of decentralization and local governance, in Southeast Europe we score at 6.3. So, I mean, this is a number, 6.3. Then the index that we're looking at looks at the progress of decentralization and quality of local governments into 4 different pillars, so 4 main dimensions. It's the autonomy of local governments, the quality of services, citizen participation and government responsiveness, and also intergovernmental dialogue. And what we see from this assessment is that local governments in the region, they enjoy a good basic legal framework for local government autonomy. So that they have a rather stable legal setup, and they're provided with political and administrative responsibilities in their areas of competencies, which are quite broad, I would say. So they have the basic framework. We have the basic framework for local governments to be able to deliver. But what we see is that the main challenge that we face is the lack of financial resources, or the lack of adequate financial resources. That's the key, one of the key challenges that we face. So from this perspective, the fiscal dimension of decentralization remains rather weak, and which immediately translate also has immediate repercussions on the quality of services. On quality of services, and then from our assessment, we see that on a scale from 1 to 10, quality of services is perceived at 5.4 out of 10. So progress has been made, but of course, I mean, we have a long way to go until we reach the desired level. So from this perspective, as I said, we need also to understand that much progress has been going on in the region at both local and national levels over the recent decade, I would say, and that these are processes that you know, they are not easy to manage and implement. But the highlight is that, from my perspective, is that decentralization in this case is a process and it's not a goal. And then the goal is to improve the quality of life of citizens, and then this can be done from my perspective as the main services are provided by local governments. So the quality of life of citizens can be done, from my perspective, only if local governments are equipped with resources, of course, I mean, with capacities and the resources to be able to deliver on these responsibilities. So if they don't have the necessary resources, they will not be able to provide services, they will not be able to create opportunities, they'll not be able to create to improve the quality of life of citizens and their life perspective. So people will continue to go from that perspective. We'll have more and more people leaving the region in search of a better life. And then that's where I would like to switch maybe also to this next topic and build in a little bit on the issue of trust. Of course, we're facing an issue of trust. That's a main challenge for our region. You know, the OECD just published a report on governance in the Western Balkans, and we noticed that about 2/3 of people in the Western Balkans, they don't trust their governments, and then they don't trust the judiciary. They don't trust that the laws are implemented as they should, and they don't trust that they are implemented equally on each individual. So there is a crisis of trust. But on the other hand, we know from surveys that have been performed that when it comes to the issue of trust, local governments enjoy much more trust on behalf of their citizens, of course, because they're closer to them, and it's easier to meet with the mayor and talk with the mayor rather than with the prime minister. But regardless of this, it's just a side note. It is clear that the local governments, from this perspective, they have a clear role to play. They can be enabled, or they can become catalysts for improving services, and therefore improving the quality of life of their citizens by creating more economic opportunities, because unemployment and then economic opportunities are the key challenges faced by the Western Balkan citizens. This is confirmed also from the Balkan Barometer of the RCC. Basically, this unemployment, economic opportunity, and corruption, these are the three challenges that are faced from our perspective in the region. So it's clear from our side that although many actors recognize this, the importance of the local government, unfortunately we don't see this from the EU perspective. We know that about 2/3 of the acquis is implemented at the local level. I mean, everything happens at the local level. That's it. I mean, we live there. So although this is 2/3 of the acquis is implemented at the local level, local governments, they are not provided a major role within this process. And the bigger issue is that even in terms of financial support, still we don't have any opportunities for local governments to be directly eligible for funding to improve the local infrastructure. Everything has to go through the national government. And when you mentioned some of the issues earlier on of the increasing political polarization at the national level, this becomes a challenge. This becomes a real challenge. So really local governments, they should be provided with this opportunity because they are closer to the citizens. They know better what the needs and preferences are. They are much more trusted by the citizens. So it's an opportunity for the EU to reach directly its future citizens by working together with the local governments. And we also need to understand that this is for us as citizens of the Western Balkans and Southeast Europe, but also for the EU. There is a growing gap in terms of infrastructure. And then the more we let this gap grow, the more difficult it would be for the Western Balkans to thrive, because the more people will leave the country. Brain drain and all of these challenges will continue to grow, and it will be even more challenging. So from that perspective, if I were to close it with a very short sentence, I would say it's important to recognize the role of local governments in public life and in the EU integration process. It's important that they are provided with capacities and, most importantly, resources to be able to deliver on that promise. Now, we know that this is not an easy process, but it is a process. So we have to keep this momentum. I mean, I don't want to close on a negative note. I also said in the beginning, much progress has been done, but there's also a long way to go. So, I mean, I'd like to also use this opportunity to thank the KDZ and the BASIC program, but also all of you who are working in your institutions to make this change possible and then make this improvement possible. I mean, all of us have to contribute. All of us contribute to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Elton. Now, we still don't know whether the glass is half full or half empty, but it seems to be half full. Let's see. So let me, I mean, I was just also again looking into the chat, and there are like 2 or 3 interesting topics that have been evolving during our panel. I would like to take them and to bring them back to you. We still have 12-13 minutes to go. It's good to try to address them. So the first one is Elton. You mentioned the issue of trust, and Claudia and Sebastian also underlined what it is. And here in the chat we have several questions regarding the trust. Rachel Kalert asked on the best ways to address the issue of trust and possible good practice examples. And then what Daniela Stojkovic was feeding in, and this is this debate with Oliver Rack in a way, that I mean, the role of the EU in creating trust, and secondly, when we speak about the civil society that needs to play a role to be a watchdog, what's the way from the civil society to address whom with all those concerns, and how to move forward in a situation where you have great systemic corruption and mainstream media, etc., etc. I mean, so this would be like first of all the issue of trust, and what's the best way, if you have any like practices, good examples, best practices to share with us. Secondly, this issue of once again, role of civil society. And then finally, what Joachim Roth was pointing out, and what we keep circling around, is this kind of a bottom-up perspective. I mean, when the citizens demand something, who is there to hear them? Is the EU able to hear the needs of the citizens when they organize themselves and want to push for effective, good governance, etc., etc.? So how to go about this one? I would say, Elton, if you would like to start first, and then we go to reverse order, Elton, Claudia, and then Sebastian.
Thank you. Thank you again, Vedran. Well, I think that the EU has a huge role to play there. The European integration process is in the top priority for each of the Western Balkan countries. And then the EU has had and continues to have a strong attraction for the citizens of the Western Balkans. So from this perspective, I think that the EU has a huge role to play in terms of creating the positive pressure that we would need to implement the very good legislation that has been put in place over the past decade. Because the laws and the legal framework is, I think, in the vast majority of cases, is very adequate. What we need to step up is to implement this legislation, and I think that the EU has a strong role there as part of the accession process. And I think that to some extent the EU is switching into this direction. As regards local government. So we see in Albania now, and in many other countries, I mean, at least in Albania, North Macedonia, but I guess also in other countries in the Western Balkans, the EU is approaching more directly local governments with investment projects. And I think that is a very positive development and a very positive sign of also a little bit of a switch into this mindset. And I think that this should increase over the future, because through this investment project, the EU is able to reach out directly to the citizens and show that this positive change is possible, and better opportunities are possible. So keep working on it.
Elton, Claudia, your take on issues of trust, civil society, and EU.
I think, well, there are, when it comes to how to establish trust, because I saw there were some questions on what you can do, and there are a lot of instruments for participatory governance. Actually, we, by coincidence, published a policy paper where we address this issue with some of the examples on what you could do. There are some very practical examples you can learn from, and I think that, if cities and municipalities are interested in how to first move on with this, or how to start with this, where to start, I think that this can be also good guidance, and to see what serves which purpose. So there are actually a lot of proven instruments out there, and I can only invite you to just maybe get in contact with me after maybe the session, and I can also point you a bit maybe in some directions. When it comes to how to encourage, or the role of the European Union, or also what to do actually to establish trust, and I guess there are, of course, some formal sort of structures in place where you can actually maybe report shortcomings. But I also have to make the observation with engaging the European Union on a formal level, there is a lot in place and a lot of sort of mechanism in place to get all kinds of feedback. But at the same time, particularly for civil society organizations, a big problem is the degree of formality and professionalism, and also sometimes the European, and also looking from the Europeans' point of view, the question on who is a trustworthy partner when someone approaches us. I think this is also still an issue in the engagement also with EU member states and civil society, that civil society organizations try to approach the European Commission, but then there is a gateway and they don't know actually how to enter this. And at the same time, the European Commission often expects a certain degree of organization that is just not yet established in a lot of the countries, and even less so, I guess, in the accession countries. So I guess maybe some of this supporting projects or support funding supporting civil society organizations should also focus on how to organize, how to build umbrella organizations, how to organize interest groups for civil society. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Claudia. I mean, there in the chat you have some links that are quite useful, and Rahel Kaller just asked if this policy paper on how to foster trust could be also shared. I mean, the conference is a perfect opportunity just to meet, but also to share insights that we have. So if you have any interesting links or studies for the chat related to the topic of public governance and democracy, just put it in the chat for all of you that are listening to us. So Sebastian Schäffer, last but not least, your take on these kind of big issues, but very important issues when it comes to the law and democracy next.
Yeah, I would just like to mention when it comes to civil society organizations, I have the feeling that it's this dichotomy between public sector and civil society. And public sector or governments bad, civil society good, and this is not how it is. There are initiatives from the civil society that are undermining what we are trying to work for. There is a civil society protesting the only measurements that we have to deal with the current situation that we are in. And we must not forget this. Now, nevertheless, civil society is necessary. And yes, as it has been mentioned in the chat, as a watchdog, this role certainly helps. But if the civil society has to support some sort of good governance for far too long, then something is fundamentally wrong in this state of governance. And this cannot be the state of play for a longer period of time. How do we build trust? Well, as long as we have people in the club and have people outside of the club, it's hard to fully trust each other. And as long as we have the problem that we discuss on the different levels that we have been mentioning in the system of multi-level governance on a European Union level, and are not able to speak with one voice in the sense that the European Commission, not the European Union. Again, I want to stress this. The European Union consists of its member states. And the European Commission wants to do and wants to implement good things. And the national member states are not supporting this, but are undermining this. Then it's hard to build trust. Because we are in this blame game. Yeah, the EU, it's their fault. Yeah, we are good. We are trying to buy a vaccine because the EU didn't manage to buy enough vaccine for all of us. This is not true, and this is not how you build trust. And therefore, what do we need to do apart from what I've already mentioned? Again, find structures and institutions also on a European level that prevent at least these mechanisms that the national governments have a possibility. So strengthen the role of the third level, the regional and local level on a European level. Don't only have a committee of the regions that is an advisory body, have a council of the European regions that is a second chamber next to the European Parliament, and give the national governments a supervisory role rather than a decision-making role, which turns out to be, in many cases, a blocking role.
Sebastian, thanks a lot for the. I mean, these are like two very important points. I mean, there's a whole debate about civil society and the expectations that we put into them, and sometimes I also have a feeling as of when the government and the national governments are not delivering, then we automatically believe that civil society is the cure of everything, like the magic formula. It just suddenly pops up and everything is fine. I mean, that's much more complicated. That there is a need to dig deeper into this issue and also to free civil society from these huge over expectations, and all the segments of the society have to fit in order to get good governance. But there will be a session afterwards starting at 3:30, focusing again on participation in civil society. And there are many of studies, so we need to put focus on this one. And regarding trust, just a kind of a short from my side. I mean, we speak about trust, but we also have to take into account that trust is not always deserved in a political arena. I mean, sometimes you rather want to have mistrust, frustrations in order to create and to make politics. I mean, this is quite often happening in those states, hybrid states that are between democracy or on the path towards democratization, but backsliding, going back and forth, a kind of a process or continuum between democracy or autocracies on the other hand side. And here we have a lot of production of mistrust, intentional production of mistrust that we also need to take care about. Thanks a lot. I mean, it's now 3. Thanks, Claudia. Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, Elton. A lot of good points. So we take Elton's optimism. The glass is half full. I just hope that we, as in 5 years, when we meet together and try to do actively, don't achieve the same scores, like 4, 455, that we move towards 10. And that progress. There are a few, as I said, few links in the chat. I will just also post a study that was just published 2 minutes ago, basically, that I wrote with my colleagues for the Free Hebert Foundation on bottom-up mobilization and the role of protests and civic movements on the local level to improve governance and improve the state of democracy. I will just put a link here in a second. I wish you, thank you all. I mean, there were up to 50 people listening and watching, which is great. Thank you all. Thank you for taking part in the debate. Thank you, panelists, for the most wonderful panel. We have now a break, and then there will be the next set of sessions. And if you want to directly establish contact with Joachim Roth, who just posted something new in the chat, or Daniela Stojkovic, you can do it directly through the chat function. Host in. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day. We all moved to Tirana to get some sun away from bloody Vienna. But anyway, enjoy the rest of the conference and have a nice day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It was a pleasure meeting you. Bye.